Thank you, Gunter.
Hier razumem.
Yes, here is Gunter Wagner, who speaks a little bit Slovenian.
Malo.
Yes, malo. Due to his wife, Mihaela Pavličev, who is Slovenian. And she's here today. And she's also evolutionary biologist on Vienna University. And there are a couple of you here also, you know, that the chair is waiting for you. That's the reason. No, that's not the reason, but that's improvised reason why this place is empty. The main reason is that, how to say, my dear peer, got sick. He was, as a matter of fact, the trigger for this conversation. And later I met Gunter, and I found out that both, so the one that is not sitting here is David Haig, professor at Harvard on evolutionary biology, and Gunter just finished his 30 years tenure on Yale.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. They are both evolutionary biologists, which nobody apart from, many of you understand what is this. Anyway, I'll come to that point. The reason those two men came, you know, why I got interested was the title of their books. David wrote a book From Darwin to Derrida. I didn't know nothing about David, and when I, as philosopher, found out what is Derrida doing with Darwin. Okay, they both. I see that there is a fact, you know, that all books are from two.
Right.
Yeah.
D, right.
Yeah. D. Yes. It's not yours. So
Yep.
when I saw, you know, Derrida, let's check it and how this relationship started. It's important. It will pop up later in our discussion. And a reason for you is quite obvious, you know, evolutionary innovation. Genes, okay. I knew a little bit about that. We'll talk about that. Homology, okay. Let's see what can we do with homology. But innovation is something that is, how to say, innovation is something that everybody understands, even if he or she is not biologist. And that's the reason for conversations, or conversation tonight, and the main trigger for hopefully next talks here. Namely, what can pop out of a meeting, of a conversation of two frequently opposing sciences, natural sciences, in this case, biology, and on the other side, human sciences. And let's say we all talk in social sciences, in philosophy, innovation. What is this innovation? We all talk about sustainability. And many other topics that especially evolutionary biology covers. And so the idea is to check whether something productive for both sides. Majority of you here today are not biologists. Thanks, Michaela, for bringing your lab here. So not all of you are from human sciences. Majority of the rest, apart from one who you will meet later, are from social sciences, or at least are not really familiar with natural sciences. So what can we learn? Obviously, you know, biologists are learning from philosophy, from social sciences in wider sense. But I don't see much of this, at least not in Slovenia, in the other direction. So that was the main reason. And so I believe that the broader perspective will help us all in this respect to understand the concept that we are dealing every day. Nothing new will come, because we are old enough and we know that we cannot really grasp much more different. I mean, we have certain platforms.
Just wait.
Yeah, okay, yeah. There are exceptions sitting here, you know. Okay. So let's see this. If there are any, of course, questions, whatever, interruptions, Gunter is coming from Vienna. He understands interruptions.
Yeah.
And they are welcomed. So let's start with this critical question that binds all of us, if I can say so. And we are all interested in what is sustainable. What is, I mean, every living creature is about sustainability, I believe, even if it cannot reflect it. But humans, we are reflecting this very much, all the time. We are talking about sustainability of companies, of sustainability of our lives, our families going to survive. Well, evolutionary biology is really dealing with that. And what is your perspective on this topic?
Okay. I think when we talk about sustainability in biology, we have to start at the beginning and realize that life is actually not supposed to be here, right? Living organisms can only exist in constant flow of energy. There's no natural law in physics or chemistry that prescribes that life can exist or should exist. So basically life only exists while constantly dying. And sustainability becomes possible sort of at three different levels. At the one hand, at the individual level, by regeneration. So we lose all kinds of cells and molecules constantly just by the laws of thermodynamics. Things fall apart. That is by reproduction, so that the individual creates a new individual. And I think the level that you're most interested in is in the long run, the evolutionary. So sustainability in life is probably most dependent on the ability of species to evolve, to change, not by maintaining one state of ideal equilibrium, because equilibrium is the death of life. So evolvability is probably the key concept. The question of sustainability then reduces to the question, what makes organisms evolvable? And that's actually a very active field of research, and don't have very definite answers, but it is a central one, because what we learned when we tried to use evolutionary principles to realize them in artificial systems. For instance, it's possible to use the basic principle of evolutionary variation and selection, so survival of the best or the fittest or whatever, in computer science, for instance, or in engineering, right? It's actually very successful, but what we learned there is that that's only possible for particular systems. So a normal computer program like a C or whatever Python program, and you vary it by exchanging simple letters in the source code, that is not evolvable. It will never produce anything that is better than what you have done. Most of them, everything will go down the drain. But people realize that if you structure the code in a way that whole meaningful parts can be replaced, and we avoid kind of changes that are most likely to destroy the program, they can evolve. They can actually evolve much better solutions to computational programs than even an experienced programmer can. So in these engineering contexts, biologists learn that even though we work on evolved and successful organisms, it's not self-evident that that should work. The random variation and selection is not guaranteed to work. It only works under certain conditions. And we learned this, as I said, in these artificial systems, because we can manipulate them, while we biologists usually only deal with the winners of the evolutionary process. So the question of how they got there, we never ask that. It never comes up as a question. So it was one of the major insights that came from computer science and engineering that led us to the realization that evolvability is not self-evident, it's not necessary, and really is sort of the key for the sustained existence of life.
But I didn't want to go to that direction, but you opened it, so sorry.
Yeah.
But anyway, you opened the question of whether evolvability, like we know with living creatures, is possible with artificial intelligence, let's say, with no phenotypes. Is it possible?
Well, even the artificial systems have phenotypes, right?
Okay, yeah.
They do stuff, what they are doing in an artificial context determines of whether they survive or not, right? So they have a sort of some kind of a code, a genome, a program, or whatever, and that program gets executed, like in development, and then they do stuff that the programmer wants to happen, and that determines the survival of that program, right? So it is quite similar to, and really fundamentally the same kind of process as we believe is happening in biological evolution.
Okay. Let's not go in that direction.
You're the boss.
Too much, because it's intriguing. But basically, one can say that you as biologists you can foresee in foreseeable time that artificial intelligence is going to develop independently of engineers, or not?
It's possible.
It's possible. Okay.
Maybe we should try to avoid that, but I don't think it's. I don't know of any law that would forbid it.
Perfect. So only we philosophers don't believe in it.
Yeah, that's
but
fine.
That's that's it. Perfect. Very good.
That's your problem.
Yeah, I have. No. I'm optimistic. I'm not afraid about the future of humanity from this point. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, that's more a joke. But when talking about sustainability, you didn't touch the term fitness, So we go to fitness, some of us, for strengthening our body. I mean, fitness has a very wide, different specters of connotations. Anyway, fitness, as I understand, and I like from evolutionary point of view, is the question, how does the next step in evolution happens? And I found out this term, adjacent possible in the fitness landscape, which serves as a mental model, how to picture myself, how things are evolving. Basically, we don't understand anything where we are. We don't see the future, and we try and err, as a matter of fact.
So let's talk about fitness first, and then fitness landscapes.
Okay.
Those are two different concepts. Of course, they are connected. So fitness is actually a quite difficult concept in biology, and it has its limits that are often not observed. So technically, fitness is just a measure of how likely a particular individual with its genes is able to compete against other individuals in the same species, right? So fitness is strictly spoken only a measure that ranks individuals or genotypes and so on in competition with other members of the same population, right? Which means that we cannot speak of fitness between species, right? Because a bacterium is not more or less fit than I am, because we are not actually competing with each other as members of the same population. They are different populations, and it's not possible to say that bacteria are less successful than we are. To the contrary, most of the biomass is microorganisms, and they are very good in what they are doing, while we are very good in what we are doing. So you can actually not compare, if you want, strategies across the set of individuals that compete with each other, right? And so that's often not observed in sort of the intuitive talk about fitness, ecological fitness. One species can drive another species into extinction, but that's a different kind of a problem. It's not described by fitness. Now, fitness landscapes is an interesting concept, because it also takes into account what an organism can do in order to change itself, right? So a fitness landscape is a set of possibilities, and adjacency means that that you can have a mutation that turns your phenotype into the phenotype of something else. And there, adjacency means that for any organism, there's only a limited set of possibilities to change, and they are quite different for different types of organisms. So when if a primate mutates, he or she has the possibility of getting larger, getting longer limbs or so on, but we don't have the ability to increase the rate at which we breathe underwater, right? Because we just don't have the starting point to be there, right? And so adjacency reflects the fact that organisms can only evolve in certain directions that is determined by what they have inherited from their ancestors. And therefore, and then on top of that is the fitness. It says, if you mutate in a particular direction, is this better than you are? Can this sort of replace the kind of organism that you are, right? So this is the combination of variational opportunities and performance consequences, if you want. And in that respect, it's
it's so neat. It's so neat for biologists, to say this. Anyway, I mean, what's the issue all the time on the table, and we've discussed this morning, is that humans are humans evolved as every species, more or less, you know. So also our culture evolves, you know. So the question here is how to, if the culture evolves, then with an analogy, one can say that also the culture cannot evolve otherwise as a adjacent possible step out of, you know.
Right.
But, you know, on the other side, we see all the time this challenge, you know, that we pose ourselves culturally some distant visions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how would a biologist see this, you know,
relationship between biology
and you know, and this struggle, you know, that we have a vision, you know, of, I don't know, whatever, net zero future of humanity, or you know, you find these utopic ideas all the time that are governing our. Does something like that happens in biosphere?
Okay, so maybe let's start with a paraphrase of Karl Clausewitz and say culture is the continuation of biology by other means.
Okay. Yes. Yes.
So there is no real, you know,
there is
no real distinction.
Exactly.
And you know, cultures also feeds back onto biological evolution, as we know, because you know the way how we live determines what kind of genes can survive in the communities that we are. I mean, the best example is the evolution of tolerance for lactose in adults, right? So once we have cattle and depended on milk for nutrition, it was distinctly disadvantageous to not being able to digest that, which means that in most populations that derive from cattle herders, this allele is a minority. It still exists as a variant and is usually seen as a disease. But in fact, it's just an ancestral state that became disadvantageous in the cultural context that arose with cultural evolution happening on top of biological evolution and then feeding back into it. But of course, we have to take into account, if we want to see how culture feeds back into biology, that it can only happen if the culture changes the chances of reproduction among individuals. It's not just by having ideas that in itself will not change our genotypes, our biology. Epigenetic effects notwithstanding, but in the standard model, culture only matters for biological evolution if it changes the fitness of individuals in the community, right?
But basically, is there any other concept of reproduction than reproduction?
Okay, that's a hard one.
I mean, reproduction is part of fitness. I mean,
fitness is the consequence of reproduction and survival, and being able to find a mate and so on, right? So it's a complex process that then ends up into a higher or lower fitness for the variants that we carry in our genomes, right?
So basically, what if I can?
So I did not forget your actual question.
Yes.
But I tried to avoid it. And the reason is, I mean, you could also make an argument that at least more complex organisms have desires and wants and ideas of what they like to do, right? I mean, you only need to be the owner of a dog in order to know that they have desires and ideas of what is going to happen in the next 5 minutes. The question of how and in what way that changes the dynamic of the evolutionary process is still a pretty open question. So the whole idea that we can actually talk about or talk in biology of agents and what role agents play in the evolutionary process is still a very open one. And it, I hate to make to create the impression that we have a definite answer. So I think that is a good question, but we don't have an answer.
You don't have an answer. Why did you come here then?
Yeah.
I mean,
because Ljubljana is beautiful. And
Ljubljana is beautiful. Yeah, because we touched, let's go first to clarify certain, points in this map that we are trying to draw now. Let's go back to innovation.
Okay.
Yes, because it's I mean, let's say mutation is a kind of innovation that either fails or not. Sometimes,
but that would be a rather sort of
short, yeah,
right, or flattened notion of innovation.
Anyway, there is innovation definitely, in evolution,
right.
and as a philosopher, I hate, and I know that science hates analogies, because analogy tells you nothing. It's just a mental concept that it's fine, it helps, but it doesn't prove anything. So, homology is something different. Could you?
Let me start with innovation.
Okay, let's start with innovation.
So you already pointed out that in the broadest sense, any kind of change, let's say a single mutation and nucleotide substitution, could be seen as something new, but it's really a rather uninteresting notion of innovation that doesn't actually capture what you probably want to think about in the social sciences and philosophy, but also in biology. But the way to explain what innovation can mean in biology, we can come back to this idea of adjacent opportunities,
yes.
right? So the way I think about innovation, like in this book here, is that there are different kinds of evolutionary change. Actually, 3 classes, right? The one is adaptation, small changes, increases fitness, and we go, Then the speciation, arising different species, sort of separating gene pools, which took a long time for biologists to understand is a fundamentally different kind of process than adaptation. And then I'm arguing that innovation is a 3rd kind, and that is distinguished from the other 2 by evolutionary changes that change the spectrum of opportunities, right? So if I'm what I am, a tetrapod, being on the earth, and what I can do is run faster and so on, and what to hide or eat other foodstuffs and so on in order to adapt to my environment. Now, an innovation is any evolutionary biological change that you could say changes the rules of adaptation. So once I acquire, however that works, the ability to fly, now the opportunities for adaptation are completely different. The game of sustaining yourself in a population now follows different rules. So basically, to me, also in biology, innovations are those changes that change the adjacent or the opportunities or the opportunity landscape. for a particular species, for an organism, and so on. And if you think about it that way, probably you could find parallels also in the social realm, where innovations that matter are the ones where the way how you are successful in a community changes fundamentally, right? And so I think it is possible to distinguish sort of normal optimization, normal accommodation of circumstances, and innovations which are cases where the rule book changes.
Rule book changes. Isn't that very similar to Thomas Kuhn differentiation between evolution and revolution? But basically, revolution is just evolution that changes the landscape.
Well, it changes the rules of further normal evolution, right? So I think, and for the biologist, it's important to understand that it's really a different kind of biological changes that allow these innovations in that sense, and we are really only at the beginning of understanding how that works and how it is different from.
Let's suppose it is like that. I mean, it's always in science.
So it must be that.
Yeah, it's always in science. You see something, and then it takes time, to really solidify the matter that you are talking about. But let's say it is like that. So basically, also in cultural revolutions which are taking place, I mean, let's say industrial revolution, all revolutions that we are talking, and also minor changed the landscape, the opportunities, and the question that pops up again, and I'm provoking. Why I'm provoking? Because
we know each other.
Yes, that's my job, but also I cannot. I would like to find someone that would say no, Okay, but basically, if you talked about a little bit how you don't understand. I mean, we know we are here, but we don't know how we came. Really, I mean, we know by traces, but we don't know really what happened in that very moment that the landscape changed, How come that industrial revolution came, Was there a very brilliant mind, I'm joking, who said, okay, now, we have to do it differently?
I mean, the most parsimonious way of thinking about that would be that probably these innovations, both in biology as well in culture, probably, that's not my field, but I'm just saying, I'm just talking, I'm not saying anything, come about by a confluence of independent development that, if you want to use analogical language, sort of start resonating with each other, right? Sort of conservation and development of knowledge and technological possibilities, exploration, and that comes together to create something, a dynamic that transforms the way how societies reproduce, right? So I think a lot of it is really coincidence of affordances that come together, historically coincidental, but once they come into contact with each other, they produce a process that sort of fixes you in a particular direction, right? Because the dynamic is so strong that it will not, it's hard to get off the rail again. So that's in a broad sense the way how I think about it.
Okay. And I think it doesn't make sense to go further to homology, or could homology as a concept?
Well, I mean, homology is sort of the mirror image of innovation.
Yeah.
because homology describes all the inventory of parts and processes that an organism has and is sharing with similar organisms, related organisms. And innovation is exactly the origin of a process or a body part that is not homologous with anything before.
Okay.
So it is a logical mirror image of innovation. And also, the set of homologa, the set of fixed features that an organism has, also defines the opportunity landscape that it has for adaptation, right? So, if I have a wing, I can do something else. If I don't have wings, if I have hoofs, I can run faster and things like that. So these are sort of connected concepts that are complementary to each other.
Yeah. So I would say for nature, it's very easy to understand adjacent possible because it doesn't understand, it just goes, But, we humans are, we speculate, We see something that could happen, but it might be even practically impossible, to come to that point,
Right. So
it
is just one of the ingredients that potentially, if interacting with other affordances that arise, that could lead to what intuitively we would call an innovation.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go back. It's all the time around this innovation, and we are talking about. But let's go deeper into the subject that is interesting for me, and I believe for everybody. When I called Matthias Kuntner, who is here tonight with us, yes. He is a biologist, evolutionary biologist on National Institute of Biology. I didn't find many who would work in this field, so I was very happy to talk with him, and I heard that you are, please, Matthias, come closer, that you will explain better, but let me try, I'm a student, so I have to learn. So you are studying sexual reproduction in insects.
Should I use
Yes, please. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for calling me up. I'm not sure I can contribute that much to this debate. It's been going great. I didn't understand the questions, but
Until now.
But I've been following your reasoning, and that's really biologically sound, and I have to agree with a lot that I've heard.
Thank you.
I just study spiders and biodiversity.
Spiders
Yeah.
and biodiversity.
So
Yeah.
I don't know what I can tell you.
No, but don't be surprised, But I asked you, spiders, biodiversity, and sexual reproduction, So could I ask you about sex differentiation in spiders? You said, yes, we have two sexes. And then you said, but I wouldn't like to talk about that much.
That's not fair.
I know it's
Did
not
I say
fair.
that?
I warned you.
Maybe if I said that,
I back you up.
it's probably because in Slovenia, our debates are usually not along the lines of what we have tonight. So I welcome this. But many times people coming from social scientists don't understand us biologists because obviously there are two sexes in spiders, as there are in humans and many, many other species, though of course not all. There are asexual organisms. But anyway, so many times we talk about very clear gender roles in biology, or definition of sexes, or even genetics of sex, and people come and say, "Oh wait, our society thinks different. You define your own gender. In biology, this is not really so, right? So that was my reluctance. But anyway, I do study spider sex from the point of view of whether or not sexual conflict that we detect drives the evolution of other traits. And that relates a little bit to key innovations that my colleague has been mentioning. So if we stick to spider sex, there's most people know about sexual cannibalism in spiders, where a female will control the duration and the events of mating by potentially cannibalizing her mate. And that happens all the time, and it happens more in some species and less in others, and it happens more in some contexts in those species that do cannibalize, and so on. So we study the occurrences of these, let's say, adaptations that then tend to trigger new and new counter-adaptations in the other sex. And then the result, in my view, is a sort of an arms race, where one sex comes up with a new key trait or behavior, and then the other counter-adapts by evolving something new. Like, we keep discovering some peculiar male adaptations to sexual cannibalism, such as catapulting away from a mating ritual, or gently wrapping the female in silk, thereby eliciting both chemicals and tactile signals to calm her down. Or sometimes some of these adaptations go beyond what I'm trying to say. But I guess so. Yeah, I do study key innovations.
So
I'm not sure if I answered any of your questions.
No, it's the issue for our community that is not technically from studying biology, apart from few of you, is, how could you these findings from other animals transfer to humans? You cannot directly, I'm quite sure, but, basically, as I know, you find similar traits also in other species. So you are not, you are specialized in spiders, but, different types of sexual conflict appears everywhere, also with humans. So basically, all the time is the question, how can we
generalize?
Really generalize.
Right. What you want to say is projectability. So projecting something with research in one context can be useful or applicable in other contexts, right? So this is what in philosophy of science is called projectability. And I think you can expect it if one phenomenon can be identified as the result of a particular formal principle. Like, the sexual conflict comes because you have different roles, and the evolutionary success of one sex versus the other depends on what the other one is doing. And then you are in an area that is captured by broadly speaking, game theory. And game theory applies to any kind of situation that has these structural properties, right? It can be applied to economic situations, to military conflicts, to whenever the success of one party depends on what the other party is doing, right? And then fitness is not a fixed property anymore. That is a property of that individual or a particular genotype, but it is the property of a particular genotype in a particular context, and the context is always changing.
That's right. Exactly, and that's how to say, somehow baffles me. Namely, okay, game theory, perfect, and prisoner dilemma and things like that, very nice, but all those situations are, how to say, very narrowed down. They are two individuals or three or blah blah blah. But basically, when we are talking about environment, there are zillion of triggers that we either compete or take in, or it's not just
I mean, what you're describing is the problem of any kind of reductive science, right? So
exactly.
In order to do science properly, you want to define the problem you want to solve, which means reduce complexity, forget about all kind, and then really understand deeply a particular, relatively narrowly defined. But
with that, you forget everything that is important.
Right, but it is something like we understand mechanics, right, of billiard balls, right?
Yes, yeah.
And in principle, we hope that what we understand there also applies to the atmosphere, right, or the weather. But the problem there is, of course, it's much more complex. There's much more variables than we can measure or know about, and then it's an empirical question how much we can actually project what we learn from the simple cases into the. And if it's not, then we have to find ways of actually integrating the more complex situation into our understanding. So it's an iterative process. I mean, we always try to get it as deep understanding as possible in a simple case, and then hope or bet that we can learn something for more, more lifelike situations. But that's an empirical question. Does it work or doesn't it work? And very often it doesn't work, which means we have to learn more.
But you have to accept it doesn't work.
Exactly. Right. But you cannot know until you try to project.
Yeah.
I think biologists, we often wander in the dark looking for some sort of rules or laws. And most of the times we think we found one, and then, obviously with millions and millions of organisms, things take very different pathways.
And the reason why that is so is because biology is rife with innovations. Mm-hmm. They change the rules of the game, and therefore, regularities or laws or whatever are very often limited to parts of biodiversity that share fundamental, rules of construction, I mean homologies, and that is sort of defines the first level of possible projectability, right? So biologists, have the main problem that we are dealing with a phenomenon that always changes the rules on us.
But this is exactly something that I miss in social sciences. That's the reason why I'm studying this, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, but there it should be
It is not, I can say so.
Okay.
Take it for granted. If there is somebody opposes me, raise your hand. I don't see you.
We will start see you.
I don't see you, so it doesn't matter. And this is exactly one of points that I think that the discussions like that should be important, because we have to apply to project, not in that sense you know, those findings that I mean that philosophy. And this I will thank you, and I will ask now, because you know you mentioned philosophy of science, and Michaela Paulicio just told me today that something that is not, and then I'll ask you another question, of course, that it is not utopic, the philosophy of science, and that it's still, how to say, it's part of your job.
Sure, sure.
And that was,
Yeah.
I must say, a surprise for me. How
It's a little bit surprise for me that it's a surprise to you.
I don't know. I mean,
So-
again, I don't want to
Yes.
say that I know everything,
No.
but
So yes, the philosophy of science is actually kind of involved with scientists all the time, and there are huge institutes, and they are involved also in most of our projects, especially when the projects are trying to tackle some more innovative, more marginal parts where a lot is going on, where ideas are still being produced. We just recently had a 1 year long workshop in Oslo on evolvability that at least to 25% was involving philosophers of biology, right? So it's very common.
you know, sorry, it's very simple answer. I just wanted to be the answer to be recorded, you know. So,
All right. Yes, absolutely.
so it has nothing to do, not much to do with this, but you know,
Yeah, absolutely.
it has to do, because okay, let's go back to the trigger, and that's it. The influence of memes or culture. Forget about memes. That's another topic, but okay. On genes, so on genomes, on further adaptability of our phenotypes and things like that. And you know, I would provoke here, and you have an experience from a couple of months ago or what you told me. So I will provoke. You know, if social constructivism regarding 80 or I don't know how many genders is going to win, that then it will influence our genome, and perhaps we won't have two sexes anymore, but more of them. This
This
is
is the short answer.
The short answer is no.
okay. I mean, this is the closest that I could get. Namely,
Right.
it's serious question. I mean, you said that
Sure.
also for I mean, in the history you found out some cases where like that lactose or things like that, so that the culture influenced.
Yeah. So to be very clear, we agree that evolution is an interaction between the variation that we produce, that organisms, populations produce, and the environment, right? That's one thing. These ideas, how culture influences evolution, is that we also produce our own environment, right?
Yeah.
And that environment feeds back as, again, a selective force that we also help generate back on us, causes selective process, right? So so you need variation, and you need the selective process in that.
You always-
So you cannot induce that so for that reason
So you need
the answer
variation.
is no.
Yeah, you need
Right.
variation, and variation comes with sexual reproduction, mainly.
Yeah. So the thing about sex is, we said that I think that came up before, that the traits are that you have to see them in a context. They are defined in a certain context, and biological sex, and this is really about biological sex, is about reproduction. It's in human. There's only one way to do that, and it's the two gametes. They are two. Only one combination of those two works, right? But as I say, this is only about really about the reproductive process, and
But if we don't reproduce, we are not fit.
Right.
But you said, I mean, on individual level, you know, I'm fit, but I have nothing from my reproduction because I will die anyway.
Yeah.
But
Evolution
still we
is not
come to
about
the
individuals,
society.
it's about,
Yeah.
it's about population and,
It's
and
about
species.
population.
You know, the process of evolutionary change is one at the level of the population, and you know, individual doesn't matter in a way, only as it contributes to this higher level process.
So basically, we could say if, but you said that even this if is questionable, if this, how to call it, gender equality, whatever, prevails, then we will not reproduce. Then, I mean,
But
how do you see?
I mean,
This conundrum.
I think it's really useful to make the distinction between sex in the
And-
biological sense and gender,
Okay.
which has to do with individual choices, behaviors, desires, and so on.
Okay.
And that is, of course, much more polymorphic and being the product of a historical development and its culture. And that, you know, that is not touched by anything what we say as biologists about biological sex, right? And also, I mean, what I want to emphasize is that anything that we as biologists says does not devalue
Right.
the life choices of people who have other ways of leading their life, whether it leads to reproduction or not. That's not something we can, we should say anything to, and we cannot. The only thing we can say is, you know, hopefully our society finds ways to make sure that you know, what I'm blocking on the the you know, dignity of each individual
Yeah,
is
dignity
conserved,
of-
regardless of
Right.
what their ideas about their gender are. So these are completely different. I think we should not mix them up. I know that people try to do that, but I think it's not good for anyone, not for biology, not for people who have their own choices.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So
And this goes for many other categories as well. Biology doesn't say anything about the value of individuals in the social context. So whether you know, we are talking about skin color, we're talking about anything
Yeah.
else.
Okay.
There's we can only say whether there is a difference or not, but that doesn't imply anything about the human,
The social
the value of
context,
the
yeah,
human
or
in a
the
social
values, yeah,
context.
yeah.
And it's really dangerous to bind these two things together. It's been done repeatedly, and it's also, I think, not good for biology to then, you know, get this backlash of trying to deny the differences that sometimes are pretty obvious,
Yes.
and therefore deny the biology, because that's not where we need you know, to make our choices,
Yeah,
or where we could make our choices. In fact.
yeah. We do anyway. Yes. Yeah. The hard question here is that, or the possible issue is that we are all the same, you know, and you are talking about differences. Of course, we are not the same. Yeah,
Not the same in the same way.
Yeah, in the same way, yes, definitely. Okay, so, but, you know, to come back to this issue in more positive way, you know, Matjaž was afraid of talking about that. I'm exaggerating, sorry. You talked about it in the safe environment. But you had a recent experience with Austrian newspaper.
Yeah, we did write about sex and gender and basically many of the things that we said right now, and you know, I didn't used to read the commentaries of the articles in newspapers because that's sometimes not a really nice experience. But in this case, I was curious, and I was surprised how positive it was taken. As we were thanked many times for clarification, and also for that, you know, relief in separating these two levels. The biological one that I think a lot of people agree with, but become somehow. Get into discomfort because of the pressure, and maybe just haven't thought about it that clearly.
Great. So majority of commentaries were
actually very positive. Yes.
Ah, perfect.
Yeah.
Surprising.
Yeah. Surprisingly so. Yeah.
Thank you. So we thought about 1 hour. We will. I don't see anything. Is there,
People are still here.
Are there?
A few things.
Thanks. If there are any questions, shout, because we don't see, we don't hear. There are some students of you here tonight.
They are.
I'm sure you have the power to criticize your professors.
They do.
Absolutely.
They do.
So if somebody wants to, please do.
Yes, if there are any comments, please.
Doesn't have to be criticism.
No.
You can also agree with us. You know? It's rare enough.
I could give a justification of the other perspective. Have talked about and is fun to talk about, but coming to a different perspective of seeing the value. Seeing the value in thinking about the possibilities of what exactly do we mean by sex. And I'm not up here to argue that sex isn't different gametes. That is absolutely, there are in sexually reproducing species 2 different types of gametes. But I think there's a really interesting conversation going on about what exactly do we mean by the category of sex, and the way that we think about and put organisms into these 2 categories based on their gametes, and the ways that those 2 categories fail to really aptly describe the different sources of variation. So when we see different morphotypes associated with those different gametes, so we see individuals that produce sperm that don't fit into a singular category, but that fit into multiple categories because they have different colorations, they have different sizes. How can selection act differently on those different individuals, on those different types of individuals? And how can we think about those in a way that isn't cohesive with this idea of 2 disparate categories, whether we call those sexes or sex morphotypes or sex categories? But I think saying that we're only talking about gametes takes us away from all these other things that we're also talking about and that are also really important to think about and that do become part of this conversation.
So this is, you professionals call this polymorphism.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Perfect. I mean, I learned something.
Yeah?
Yeah, sure, of course.
So, I mean, that actually starts a very important conversation, one that is not prominent enough in these conversations. And that is the question of whether we talk about sex as categories, you know, male and female as categories. And if you categorize, you know, like, you know, numbers, even numbers or odd numbers, so they are defined, you know, they have defined properties and therefore, you know, distinct. And in biology, in particular in comparative biology and in evolutionary biology, we never have categories that are so well defined, right?
Yes.
So the only thing we can use quasi-categories, which we attach names to, are things that play a particular role in particular developmental biological processes, right? And these categories never deny that the underlying reality of biology is one of variation. There's much more than you can capture with these things. So if we talk about sex, it defines it by a particular biological role and process in reproduction, but that doesn't deny, or it would be non-biological to deny that there is more variation out there. And at least if you are within the species of humans, a lot of that variation cannot be sort of slotted into these reproductive functions. It's still real. There still are individuals, and we have to acknowledge them. And we have to find ways of make sure that they have a fulfilled life as well. But that doesn't mean that there are now 5 or 20 sexes, right? If you think about these sexes as functional categories.
But
right?
are you talking about here about 5 or 6 different gametes? Because then yes, I agree. But or 5 or 6 different reproductive modes, ways of investing into reproduction, ways of engaging, like ways of types of different paternal care, parental care, types of different, there are different forms of reproductive investment that can vary between and within the individuals, regardless of the type of gamete they produce, that still has the potential to affect
those are,
next generations.
Behavioral variants and strategies, if you want.
Yeah.
And they have their value or are selected against depending on what ecology and so on.
Exactly, and that I think it's important to keep in mind that when we think about the categories of male and female, or to think about sexes, how do we account for both this level of gametic contribution as well as these other contributions in the types of variation and the evolutionary consequences that it is just you require a sperm and an egg to fuse, but you can have selection on all these different other.
Right. So what you're saying is that and I completely agree that in reproductive biology there are different levels of phenotypes that play a role for successful reproduction or unsuccessful reproduction that go beyond the gametic and genital level, right? And sort of the trouble really arises by just trying to project it all the way up to individual behavior. And we just need to recognize there are different levels of biological reality where contributions to reproduction can be more than binary.
Exactly.
And but that we still don't mean that there are now sexes in this more focused sense.
That anisogamy doesn't exist. Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So the problem is that biology is complex.
Yeah.
It exists on different levels.
But
and if we deny that complexity, we really hurt
it loses.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
So I won't take more space.
No.
I think that saying no prevents us from having these conversations, and that these conversations are so important.
Right.
Yeah.
That was very. I liked it personally, and it brings us back, to the main issue that are having also natural sciences at the moment. But I find it in social sciences even more in different way, namely this reductionism. The idea that we could, classify, that we could come the one unifying, theory of everything, one algorithm that would, explain everything and fix.
With that, we are back to the topic that you raised at the beginning. It's innovation.
It's
right?
innovation.
Because of innovation, we cannot reduce to simple rules because the rules change fundamentally in historical and evolutionary processes.
I just wanted to add, so that it doesn't. It sounds a little bit negative, that still means that our only means to work is still reductionist. It just not we just should not forget the context, right? So we still have to go into the depth first to understand something. The question is asked
Yes,
afterwards whether it's projectable or not.
Whether it's projectable, whether what do we do with findings, how do we conceptualize them, I mean the interesting story in relation to this, for me, is in genetics. It used to be, pictured like, genes are digits, simple, definable, ATGT,
Whatever. Yeah.
There is my blockage. I didn't do a PhD on genetics yet. So basically, what I found interesting, and well, David is not here, is that genes are extremely fluid. They don't have really borders. And we are talking now about, you explained categorization, it's, you can see it that way, you can see it that way, And also genes are like that. And so this utopia, that with a gene, with a reduction to a gene, we will explain phenotype, it's over.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, 20 years ago, it wasn't like that, or was it?
Right, but on the other hand, the ideas like that did lead us somewhere, not where we thought we would end up, but indeed they did, right?
No, I don't. I don't want to challenge scientific method.
No. But I think it's important to start somewhere. To this fear that you will not be able to explain everything anyway, doesn't stop you from starting in that little point.
But basically, for at least for the community that is not so, how to say, fluent in genetics, it's quite an important message.
I mean,
don't rely, that now, just give up. Everything is solved, with genome. Yeah, I mean that's a kind of impression that it's still, at least in popular media, they are still repeating this. Okay, they even that stupidity, now they found a genome for Alzheimer, or I don't know, a gene for Alzheimer. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, it's important to understand, it's the shorthand is always, the gene is the DNA. It is this molecule that has this basis, A, T, G, C, and so on. And its sequence, carries meaning, which at the first approximation is interesting, but it's really not reflecting biological reality, because DNA is, first of all, a relatively inert molecule. And it becomes a gene only if it's embedded in a cell.
In a cell, yes.
And the cell is using it to achieve certain goals, like surviving, digesting, and so on. So a gene is actually more the relationship between the DNA molecule and the cellular context in which it exists, right?
So this is called epigenetics, what you are...
In a broader sense.
In a broader sense, yes.
Let's not call it that way.
No, I mean, because, there are certain terms that are popping up in...
Yeah, I mean, epigenetics has a very narrow meaning and a broader meaning. What we are talking about is the broader meaning, namely all the processes that live on top of the genetics, right? Epigenetics. So the old meaning, actually going back to the mid-20th century, epigenetics was anything within which genes are involved, but there are other processes included. And nowadays, the narrow meaning is any form of chemical modification of the genome itself that then influences the way that DNA can be used or not used. So there's sort of a duality of meaning, and therefore it's better to avoid it because it takes time to explain the differences.
Well, you know what is one of takeoffs, you know, from such conversations for those that are not in biology. There are some managers here, you know, different kind of academics and things like that. Is that avoid being too fixed, you know.
Right.
I mean, if
sustainability is change.
Sustainability is change, is variation, and the question is, of course, how to manage sustainability, and there is no final answer.
Well, for the social and organizational level, you know, I think we as biologists should be modest and say we cannot give you advice because it would require domain knowledge that we don't have.
That you don't have.
That you guys need to bring to bear. But what we can is to give you a hope that some views or perspectives may help overcome blockages in thinking about problems. Yeah. That's.
I mean, I knew that somehow. You should go to European Commission, and tell them what is sustainability, because now many of you know that the directive on corporate sustainable reporting is coming out.
That helps.
Sorry.
That will help. Creating more unsustainable reporting.
But what is interesting there is that they are forcing companies, to define upstream and downstream value chains. And if I translate this into biology, is upstream is a food, and downstream is a how it's called, excrement or
excrement.
Excrement, yes. Yeah, sorry. I mean, it's.
But in biology, if we go beyond this analogy, bacteria actually feed upon each other's secretions, right?
Yes,
so
exactly.
All that.
So that's circular.
Right.
We call this circular economy. If you didn't hear it.
Yeah.
So it's circular economy. Yeah. I'm sure that those from Brussels won't hear this, won't listen to this, so we are
ready for a beer.
Ready. Yes. That was, as a matter of fact, it's always 1 hour and a half. If there are any questions, I think.
There is one. Yeah.
Yes.
Can you please come forward?
Come closer. Yeah.
Okay. First, I have to apologize myself. My basic education is economy, so perhaps I will sound strange, but I would like to go to the topic. What is the progress? Could you say a few sentences? What is really the definition of the progress? Because I'm asking myself as somebody working in the economy, in the business, and now in leadership training and so on, did we really make any progress in our evolution, let us say? Because if the definition of the prehistoric communities was that the members of the society were feeling safe, protected, and so on, how do we feel today? Did we really make any progress? How we are now heading in this progress?
That's so typical for me. That was the topic of this conversation.
You forgot about it.
Thank you.
I distracted you successfully.
At least his name is Andrei as mine. So so thank you. So yes,
I mean, progress has a bad as a concept, a bad reputation in biology because of course there was is a long history of people thinking about evolutionary change in terms of progressive processes, leading to a goal-oriented.
Yes.
Goal-oriented, yes.
And there's a simple answer and there's a complicated answer. The simple answer is that in biology we don't accept the existence of goals, but I think it is that they are pre-given goals that evolution would drive towards, making humans or whatever, as if that would be a good idea. But there's a phenomenon that I think triggers this idea of progress that is, I think, also very correct, and that is the fact that that evolutionary processes have sort of this property of sort of self-directing, right? Producing a quasi-directability out of itself, right? Because of what we have discussed before about the affordances and innovations that then move the whole thing in a particular direction. So I think to deny that there is much more structure to evolutionary or historical change than the more radical members of our community want to accept is not realistic. So I think what we see as progress is always post-hoc, right? If we think that it's a good idea to have industrialized or in community, then in retrospect we categorize that as progress, but it's always in hindsight, and so I don't think progress in this sort of positive, goal-directed way is a good way of thinking. It just happens to us.
But it's Georg Friedrich Hegel who said the all of wisdom always comes late,
right?
Or something like that. I'm not very good at citation. Like Slavoj Žižek, he would say on which page this. This is it's hindsight. Yes, it's.
Which means we should construct our next form of progress carefully.
Yeah. That's the at least as I see, as a major challenge of today's society is this idea implanted in heads that you can really construct the future in a way on.
So we had experience with 5-year plans before. And
yes, it didn't work. Yes, but that. Yeah. My hope was, that biologists would spoil this game, but you are not enough persistent. You are too modest.
I'm sorry to disappoint you.
Yeah. Okay. At least I hope that Andrei, did you? Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other, I don't know, questions, suggestions, disagreements? You cannot disagree with us, as you've already noticed, but you can add up something. If not, then I will thank you for coming to Ljubljana just for this occasion. Yes.
Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure.
I'm sorry David is not here, but
me too.
There will be another opportunity if Tomasz allows us another session somewhere. It definitely. I was always surprised because humans, we are biological beings, and how come that biology is so pushed aside? At least from what I perceive, Okay, that's.
It's also the fault of many biologists because they don't want to engage.
They don't want to engage. Yes, yeah. It's always like that. Yes. But basically, I hope that that part of the audience that is not a part of biological sphere got a hint about important issues that link together social sciences and things that we are all thinking about, how to survive, what are triggers for our success. It doesn't matter what you work, in which business you are, if you are not in business. In any case, we are dealing with these sustainability issues, with fitness in the broader sense and things like that. So I really hope that some thoughts popped out into your minds as well. It did to mine. So thank you again, and I cannot stop. So let's stop.